Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? There we go. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for coming out to attend this amazing event. We are so pleased and delighted that we're able to present the work of Qualeasha Wood and to host this talk today with Leandra Kelley. I'm excited about that because Leandra has a very unique interdisciplinary background. She earned her BA in ethnomusicology from Earlham College and an MA in the same from King's College in London, an MS degree in history of art from University of Edinburgh, and she's held professional positions at Cincinnati Art Museum, Taft Museum of Art, the Beckler Museum of Art, and at the Harvey Gantt Center for African American Arts and Culture. She is currently a PhD candidate in art and art history with the Visual Studies program at Duke University. Qualeasha also brings an interdisciplinary practice to Rowan, blending the digital and analog in her process. Qualeasha received a BA from Rhode Island School of Design and an MA from Cranebrook Academy of Fine Art. She is originally from New Jersey, but currently lives and works in Philadelphia. She has exhibited internationally with the Pippi Holsworth Gallery in London, which represents her work, and several other locations in London, including the Victoria and Albert Museum and the Somerset House in London. She had her first institutional exhibition at the Gantt, which was also curated by our guest, Leandra, today. Other solo exhibitions and group exhibitions included the High Museum in Georgia, the Brooklyn Museum in New York, Institute in Chicago, Hauser and Wirth in New York and Los Angeles, MoMA PS1 in New York, and the Met Museum also in New York, which I'm sure you all knew that. I didn't have to tell you that. Anyway, her work is also in many, many collections. I would be remiss, though, if I didn't acknowledge our team here at the Art Museum. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Kristen Qualls, our gallery coordinator, for making exhibition production seamless and happens like magic. Also helping us out today are our student workers, Allison Hillman, Eva Castaldi, and Jayla Ross are here. And our photographer is Riley Walker. We're also supported by tech from RTN, Radio Television Network, and the Rowan's Art Engine. One final note, this event today is streaming live, and if you would like to ask questions after the talk today, we will have someone going around with the microphone so that we can get that on the recording. So enough of that. Please welcome Leandra and Qualeasha.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Okay. Can you hear me from here? Okay. Okay, yeah, thank you.
We're a little soft-spoken over here.
Thank you. Okay, perfect.
I am sometimes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to share this exhibition with you all. And so let's just jump right into questions. So the exhibition is centered around the concept of digital Edens. How do you create your digital Eden, and what tools do you use?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I've been thinking about this question a lot, and even just the idea of what a digital Eden is. And I think it's been like, I guess, a lifelong creation, and it's looked different at different times of my life. When I was younger, my first digital Eden, honestly, was Club Penguin, which feels so weird to say, to kind of reference this like very childish memory of mine. But that was really the first time I think I really like came into myself and started kind of playing with an idea of an identity. So internet role-playing, online multiplayer web games, where you could kind of jump into an avatar and be anonymous, was a way that I first started discovering digital Edens. And I think for me that then expanded into looking at different forms of avatars and social profiles and networking. So even thinking about MySpace, Tumblr, the ability to kind of then code and change your environment, kind of curate how someone came into a space, thinking about like, I know a lot of people loved Chris Brown. At the time, I personally was a really big fan of Escape the Fate, so that's a really big like difference. But just like thinking about like what someone would listen to when they clicked on your profile, it was really about building a paradise, a safe space, an identity, kind of through changing your environment, which looked a lot different than from my physical one. Growing up as a alternative Black girl in a predominantly like white school and town, to a degree, it can be really isolating and really challenging, I think, to figure out like where you sit and who you want to be. So those digital Edens for me, I think at that age were really important, but they exist still for me now in so many ways. Virtual reality, life simulators, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, I remember for MySpace, it was a really big decision what song you chose to be on your profile. So I remember those days vividly. And so what are the challenges of digital spaces, and what role do you think they play IRL or in our everyday lives?
Oh, I think there's so many challenges, and I'll try not to get like too doomer here. I think the best part, right? I think we got into, right, which is like the ability to self-discover and determine and identify. But I think the biggest problem with digital spaces is their interference. They are distracting as much as they can be a positive escape. They are also just that. They're coping mechanisms. They're methods of escapism, and they also are just things that pull you away from our present reality. So a thing that I've been thinking about a lot, especially in regards to Black ontology, is considering the difference between like the IRL space and this digital space, and how we kind of cross into both, and how at a certain point there becomes this desire to stay, but also to leave. So thinking about, when I go into watch a movie, and you're watching a movie and you're transported through into the screen, and then your phone rings, or you feel a buzz and you pull your phone out and you start texting and you go somewhere else. So I think one of the things that we lose is this ability to be present. And then we also, I think, then become desensitized to our reality. Sherry Turkle wrote about life on the screen, and that was the title of one of her early books, and I think it was 1999. It was timed with the release of the personal home computer and internet access, and she talks about digital pets, Tamagotchis and Neopets, and how for kids, most of them would then grow up to have their first death be artificial.
Yeah.
And as somebody who was born in 1996 and grew up and has never known a life outside of the internet or outside of computers, I think about that, right? And how like the first thing I knew to die wasn't real. And I think that really does alter your perception of, right, the world and like what we should kind of be doing. And I think, as we sort of continue, right now I'm like, oh, I'd rather be doing this than like, doing a lot of other things. I'd rather be on my phone watching a video than going to class or going to these other things. So we start to make these negotiations, and we start to kind of choose. And I think, like anything else, the over access, and I think like the lack of moderation makes internet or digital spaces a bit dangerous.
Yeah. And so in your work, you've explored this concept of Deus ex machina, stating that this device allows us to highlight the paradoxical position of Black women in society, cast simultaneously as both saviors and scapegoats within a white supremacist framework. I would love to hear you speak more about this, especially as it really relates to your piece, Deus ex machina, What Was I Made For?
Yeah, it was a really a wild experience making that piece, and it's really one of my favorite works. Someone just asked me, like, if you had to pick your favorite piece of all time, I really do think it's that work, because for me it highlights or answers, I would say, a lot of the questions that I'm trying to get into, which is really a question of purpose. I made the work thinking about two movies in particular, Ex Machina and the Barbie movie. And Ex Machina features, a man who wins a lottery to basically go test out this AI robotic woman. I'm like, for lack of better phrasing. And he sort of falls in love with her, and then, not to spoil the film, but it doesn't go so well, because Ava's kind of point in this film is thinking about her own survival, her own being outside of existing as a tool for someone else. And I saw that movie and I was like, that was really interesting. And then I saw the Barbie movie maybe a week or two after. And the Barbie movie for me was a really disappointing experience. And I wondered, I was like, why? Like, why did I hate this movie so much? Because it wasn't that I didn't think that it was like a good movie, I just think it wasn't great. And there was a lot of, I think, praise and, high acclaim for that film that I felt like kind of only scratched the surface of understanding feminism and what it means to really be a woman and alive right now. And so I started kind of poking and prodding at those things, and I was like, well, where does Ex Machina even come from as a term? And Ex Machina means, machine, and Deus Ex Machina meaning God from the machine. And what is a Deus Ex Machina? It's a literary trope, Shakespearean, really in origin, but it really looks at all of these stories in which the main protagonist would have died or suffered or just completely, evaporated had it not been from this magical interference, this divine interference from the gods. So that's what a Deus Ex Machina is. The Barbie movie kind of revealed that the purpose of women in that movie was kind of to exist as something for, men to sort of profit off of or kind of be consumed by. So I started to kind of think, well, both of these women, though, kind of escape that.
Right.
And where do we go from there? And there's still that question of purpose. And then I think about Billie Eilish and, that song, what was I made for? And I felt like, to me, those two things, Deus Ex Machina and what was I made for, sort of asked and answered a question. And with that framework in mind, thinking then, okay, what was I made for? I was made as this divine intervention for the machine. But what is the machine, and then who am I in that? And so I started to just think about things that I've maybe heard within my practice. A lot of the times people ask me, do I associate myself within the work with a character? Or with performance, and I feel like a lot of the times I've been like, no, these aren't like performances and these aren't characters, but I think it was really important for me to ask myself, is that like totally true? And like where is that overlap kind of at? And so thinking again about God and about these ideas of purpose and creation, I looked at Eve as an archetype, as a character. This idea of like the first woman to exist on this planet being one of the most revered, but also like one of the most hated, which I think about once a month, and I'm like, we didn't have to eat that apple. But just thinking about those things, kind of, Eve was really scapegoated. And so when I think, again, these things are not like, I think the point is everyone's probably looking like, well, what's the point? The point is there is no easy answer. There is no clean, cut, dry solution. A lot of the work, and a piece like Deus Ex Machina for me, is about beginning to sort of unravel these things until I kind of reach a point of, I don't know, like content with being so contradictory.
Yeah.
I think with being so unable to maybe necessarily locate the why, but just still being okay with the me and the how and the kind of like what's left out of that.
And I think that's something that's been explored even in feminist theoretical spaces in terms of, the idea of the cyborg and hybridity and these contradictory elements being able to coexist and being able to accept them equally. So I think that's sounds very much in line with this work. And so you touched on performance, which brings us to our next question. would really like to highlight this piece, Bedrock. And can you speak more about the process of bed rotting, and why do you think so many people find comfort in doom scrolling? And then also pictured here is your performance work, Attention Economy, and kind of what was it like to bring those themes to life in performance as well?
Yeah, bed rotting for me came from a very personal place of, I think, just feeling lost. 2024 pre-election times were not really fun times, and I think I kind of just found myself trying to figure out, like, what was I gonna do? Was there anything for me to do? And I think, like most people, I found myself like on my phone. I think like just like searching for what I'm not sure. And as that time went on, I just realized I was spending hours upon hours on my phone. And everyone around me was complaining about how they were spending hours and hours on their phone, but not really doing anything with that. We weren't talking to more people. We weren't keeping in touch with our friends. We didn't really necessarily care about viewing the lives of people we knew, but just sort of about being somewhere else, feeling distracted, but also not feeling like you can look away. I think with so much in the news, so much trauma, so much violence, and so much disaster, you feel a responsibility to look. So it's kind of a contradictory place to be in, but we all do it. And so I was realizing I was spending like 10 hours, right, in bed. And I just was like, well, why is that? And as I'm in bed, scrolling on my phone, I'm starting to see memes about bed rotting that are like encouraging it. So that was kind of, I think for me, where I started paying attention to, this is like a very widespread thing. And like, not only am I just doing this of like my own free will, but I'm being encouraged to do it then by an algorithm that's probably noticing, right, how long I'm on my phone, how long I'm staying within a certain app, how long I stay on a certain screen, if I'm tapping links and I'm buying things. And so all of that has a secret hidden motivation outside of us. So I just became really, really interested in that as phenomena, and I started doing the research. There are articles that will ask, bed rotting, is it radical self-care or just self-harm? That even as a question to me was like mind-blowing, because I was like, well, that's true. I feel like I'm resting, or I'm attempting to rest, and I need that rest. I'm exhausted, I'm burnt out, but I'm not actually resting. I don't feel better when I get up after I've been laying for, 6 or, however many hours. So I just was like, why do we pretend like we don't do this thing? Or why do we romanticize this thing and kind of don't let it be as ugly and as upsetting as it can be? I read My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Mosfeg, and the main protagonist in that story goes through this grief and this trauma and decides that she wants to sleep until she has regenerated all of the cells in her body. So she figures if she sleeps for a year, that's enough time to undo like 7 years worth of trauma in her life. And I remember the first time I read it, I was like, this is insane. The amount of privilege and the amount of money, the amount where you have to be in your life to even, and the woman was a art dealer, which I found really funny, but you just need so much to even just tap out to exit. So then I realized that the idea of rest can't even really be about radical self-care when the people who need it the most can't access it, because the people who need it the most have to go work a 9 to 5, right? You can't do that if you have, these things to do. So I just became like really into that idea, and I started saying, well, why don't I do something with that? Frankly, I was like, I don't want to be depressed anymore. So I started filming myself in bed, and it was me doing nothing, just getting in bed, getting out of bed. This was the first time that I think I made work that wasn't about, I don't think any of it's about looking good, but I think I was really like, it's okay to look however. So wearing like a Harley Davidson t-shirt instead of a dress, or instead of something that might be a little more flattering, and kind of showing up in my PJs. I almost showed up in my bonnet. But just thinking about the vulnerability of that, and kind of wanting to share that it was a universal experience, but also I think how damaging it is to still do nothing, and how still so much is happening around you while we're doing nothing. And so I looked at, and particularly in this piece, Bed Rot, the election, so looking at Kamala Harris's infamous coconut tree speech, and looking then at Brat Summer that was happening at the same time to kind of show, I think, the violence of compounding events when we are viewing life through our smartphones and not through our own lens. So that was where the piece started, and for me that ended up then going into 2 other pieces, going into Visions of a Life, which is in the back, and then going into I Believe There's Meaning, I Believe There's Nothing, and then, well, I guess, 3 pieces, and then going into Attention Economy as a performance. That, for me, was really trying to see, I think, what is the line in performance. And Legacy Russell has a line in Glitch Feminism, and very, very early on, where she talks about this idea of a performance and non-performance. And I really just liked that as a sentence. And I was like, well, what does that mean to perform but also not perform? And like thinking about Marina Abramovich and kind of her method of, there's this line between when something is acting and versus when it's real. And so for me, I was like, well, if we're gonna have all this conversation about bed rotting and why it's wrong, I don't want it to just be glossed over as this footnote. I really wanted to have people sit with that. And I was like, and what better way than to have an opening that I'm not present for, that I'm physically at, but I'm completely inaccessible in. And for me, that was, it was part social experiment. Yeah. But I wanted to talk about also how people will look at you even when nothing's happening. And a lot of my experience online is like that, and I think, a lot of people can relate of, you post yourself online for this like invisible audience, and there are thousands of people who look at you, and then maybe only 10 that interact with you. Right. So there is this weird tension there, and then it was what I felt like in the bed, right? Hyper visible, but also like invisible. Really, really vulnerable and really like scared, but also kind of like completely somewhere else. Again, like that idea that you can get on your phone and just be somewhere else completely just takes you out of the room. So yeah, it was just, for me, I think like interesting. And then also I was like, why would people watch this? Instead of engaging, right, with people around you. Like I think a lot of people were offended because we also didn't tell people fully. So some people didn't realize when they got there that they wouldn't be able to speak to me, like for the entire opening. But they kind of stayed anyway. So it was, for me, it was a weird thing. Yeah. It was really weird.
And I really like how you touched on the dual sides of bed rotting or doom scrolling, and how, is it rest or can it cause harm, and how do these corporations that own these platforms benefit from us doom scrolling? Because is a question that I think about a lot with this exhibition, or what or where are the snakes in the garden and the digital paradises. So I'm glad you spoke about that. And as we've just noted, you've expanded your artistic practice to include video and performance art, and the exhibition includes 2 new video works, Malware and Visions of a Life. How does the ephemeral nature of these mediums impact your creative process?
Yeah, it's been really interesting because video and performance is something that I think I've always worked in. It just hasn't been something that's been shared with anybody. I think for me, the videos and the performances are almost evidence of the practice. There are these things that kind of happen in and around the practice that then I come back to and feel so incredibly drawn to because they do start to kind of unfold a narrative. With Malware specifically, Malware uses several different videos of me lip syncing Gwen Stefani's What You Waiting For, and a few different songs, and also then look at me vaping, screen recording my phone while I'm trying on different filters on TikTok, while I'm watching different TikTok lives, really thinking about life through a screen, and Malware specifically thinking about computer viruses and kind of the insidious natures of these smart devices and kind of algorithms and what they do. So for me, with Malware, I really was just thinking about, with my video practice, I've thought a lot about like what happens and then what doesn't happen, and kind of these moments in between, and these really like these nonlinear moments that come together to make a more beautiful or a more succinct story. Malware for me was a focus on material, so I was really drawn to data moshing, which for those who don't know, data moshing is a way of editing and kind of destroying a video within the editing process. So you are actively going into a video timeline and deleting scenes and moments from a video to sort of then leave these ghost trailing pixels behind. Glitches to me are really important because they resist. Because they kind of refuse this erasure. So for me, conceptually, thinking about myself kind of as a glitch in the matrix, or thinking about glitches within my own system, sort of kind of fighting within itself, I think are really important. There's also then for me just this like love of music videos. There was a race between Caroline Polachek and Kanye West to see who would have the first data moshing video. Caroline Polachek's band won. They came out with a video a week before Kanye, and then data moshing became really popular through pop culture and through music videos. For me, I think most notably ASAP Rocky's Lamborghini High.
Yeah.
So for me, it was just kind of just about taking this pop culture reference, this like Tumblr, this like online YouTube reference, and feeling or figuring out like if it could do something else somewhere else. And so again, taking these private moments, these get ready with me videos, these different things, and distorting them and showing them outside of their context is a continued conversation, right, on how we get on our phones and interact. Visions of a Life was really different in the exact opposite, because as I'm saying that malware focuses on these videos I've taken of me, Visions of a Life are entirely of videos of me that don't exist and never happened. So the contrast there is Visions of a Life works with about 6 still images of me that are then translated into 5-second videos that are then regenerated over and over and over again using AI video programs, which I will also say this piece was made about a year and a half ago now. So we're in a very different place with AI. But for me at the time, it was about understanding, if at all, where Black people sat in the conversation on AI and thinking about data scraping. And as we all know now, AI companies data scrape YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, social media, Google, wherever they can to kind of sort of find these ideas or these glimpses of people, but they don't really train AI models extensively or specifically on the lives or on the activities of Black people.
Yeah.
So you'll notice in Visions of a Life, there are a lot of figures rendered that don't look at all like me, that come up as a different race. For the longest time when I first started making the video, I kept getting generated into a white woman, like repeatedly over and over. So even in a medium that is designed to steal and rewrite and replace, you're still kind of not able to see yourself in that. So I was really just intrigued and where I could see myself, if I could see myself, especially then in an AI's ability to represent the self, which, you know, I think is questionable at best.
Yeah, and I think off of that, you know, AI comes up in discussions around the arts and creative practices. For you, do you have any advice for artists who may be considering using AI?
I think my only advice is to really ask yourself why. Because I think, you know, there's a lot we can say. We can blanket say AI is bad, which it is, and then we also can say, and we are moving forward into the future, so that doesn't mean that this thing is just going to disappear. But I do think that like how most people use AI is not necessary. It's not helpful. It's not even smart. You and I had this conversation yesterday where we both just think that a lot of these AI models are actually not as impressive or not as smart as we think they are. The most exciting thing about AI is what people can do with it, and how AI can be used as an assistant within your work and a collaborator at a minimum, or at a maximum, I would say, but at a minimum scale of collaboration. As to do something that you can't do, that you maybe can't afford to do. Like I think about how great AI would have been for me, you know, when I didn't know how to video edit at all, you know, and I was paying video editors. But also for me, there's something interesting, right, about the human hand doing certain things versus a computerized or an AI hand doing certain things. But it's about your interests, right? An AI drawing is never going to be better than a drawing made by a human. An AI completely led story doesn't have human connection. So again, I think that, it's easy, I think, to say just don't do it, but I think you have to figure out a way to do something that's interesting if you are interested. And if not, maybe it's just not your medium to play in.
Yeah, and that's okay too.
Yeah, and, and that's
okay.
fine. Like,
and in a couple of your works, you incorporate iconography from the video game The Sims.
Yeah.
Particularly, I believe there's meaning, I believe there's nothing. What role do video games play in your artistic process, and how do you view games in regard to this idea of digital paradise? And what's your favorite video game to play?
oh my gosh. Okay. Well, The Sims particular for me, I've been playing The Sims since I was 7. So that's like 2 decades,
Yeah.
22 years of simming. And for those of you who don't know, The Sims is a life simulator. My mom is here, she's nodding because she played The Sims with me my whole childhood. But I started playing The Sims when I was 7, and that was where I learned all of, I think, about how to be a person in the world, which is strange to say, but I learned about the concept of free will. I remember seeing that in the settings menu, and it was something that you could turn on or off for your Sims. And I remember then reading the description for free will and how they were explaining, right, your Sims will either stay here and wait for you or they won't. And I remember thinking, why would I want to turn it off? Like, why wouldn't I kind of want them to have that? And I didn't even realize, right, like on a full life, real life spectrum, that free will is not something that is afforded to everybody.
Right.
And I think, growing up on The Sims and being in a world of my own creation where I was able to build myself and my family and cheat, add in money, and and add in a backyard that I didn't have, or these different moments of a life I couldn't physically access, I think allowed me to go out into the real world and want more for myself or feel a lot less limited. And so when I look at then my relationship to a game like The Sims, it was a lot of hope and a lot of possibility and a lot of understanding of autonomy. When I look, though, at how I use The Sims, in this work in particular, I think it was kind of like thinking about the nostalgia of that, right? Of feeling once like, I had this life ahead of me that no one can kind of tell me what to do or who to be. And that was really especially important, I think, growing up as a young Black girl. And then now, as a young Black woman, I'm like, oh, it's not like that. I sometimes feel like a helpless Sim, right? Waiting for someone else to kind of make the decision or put me in this place or give me money or take away my money or, just sometimes it feels like, especially when I'm thinking about like Fenton and thinking about Afro-pessimism and this idea of objecthood and black objects in relationship to white people, I think I start to feel like a Sim, and I think I start to question my purpose and my ability to do things for myself besides kind of remain in bed. And this was, again, a follow-up to the bed rotting piece. So it was kind of then this moment of, what do I do now? Like, do I get up? Do I stay? Do I go? And yeah, just like wondering, like, am I in control of my own life? And then, playing around with text there to sort of bring it then into a present-day context. Sorry, what was the rest of?
No, I really like how you touched, you gave your story and experience about how playing The Sims gave you, really affected how you navigated real life, because that really is something that we touch on in the show, and how these digital spaces have real life implications as well. The other part, I was just curious what your favorite video game is to play, at least right now.
My favorite video game right now is probably Baldur's Gate 3, which is such a nerd thing to say, but I've got like 1,000 hours, not an exaggeration, in that game. It's the only game I've really consistently played for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Mainly because of the character creation, right?
Yeah.
This idea of, I've always loved choose your own adventure books, right? Because I was like, where else am I going to see myself in a book that's not depressing, right? Outside of a choose your own adventure. So I love, like, RPGs, role-playing games. I love, existing in a fantasy world where, the real things don't apply. Outside of that, I play Fortnite.
Yeah.
I play Call of Duty.
Yeah.
I still play The Sims. Literally anything I game with in all of my spare time, really.
Cool. And earlier you discussed like music videos and how music has impacted you and influenced you. So I guess, yeah, just I'd like to hear more about that because you often even share on social media the music that you're listening to as you work. So what have you been listening to recently, and is there a musician or song that you always go back to?
I'm like, I haven't, you know, it's funny, I've just been saying I need to make a new playlist because the last thing I really listened to was my playlist from my last show. So my last solo show was titled Malware. And I've been listening to that playlist, which was a lot of, it literally opens with Out of Touch, Out of Time by Hall & Oates, then goes into Look at Me Now by Caroline Polachek, then goes into Split by Willow.
Nice.
So it's a very like moody, very like dissociative identity kind of journey. Right now, I'm listening to that. I've been listening to my big theme right now, I think, is looking at escapism and thinking about that like really fine line. And I've noticed a lot of pop music is really sad.
Yeah.
Like a lot of pop music is completely depressing, and Pocketful of Sunshine by Natasha Bedingfield is one of those songs that I heard as a kid that always brought me joy, and I think everybody remembers. You hear that in the mall, you hear that in the grocery store, you hear it in the car, you hear it on the TV. It's everywhere. It's like impossibly happy and hopeful. It's hopecore, but it's so sad. It's like the saddest song ever, and it's literally about having resilience and kind of not letting the world bring you into an awful negative space or whatever your situation is into that space. And so I've been listening to a lot of that and thinking about, you know, these kind of coping mechanisms. So I've been listening to a lot of that. A lot of the pieces in the show are named after either singers or songs, Kirk Franklin type beat. My love for gospel music. That title even came about because every Sunday, I just grew up hearing gospel, especially then, you know, being here in South Jersey right now, a lot of my family lives in South Jersey, and the only thing that they would play in the car was classical jazz and gospel. So I grew up kind of with this, you know, love-hate relationship for that music, but as an adult, when we were in the studio and we're kind of grinding towards these deadlines, we always play gospel on the last day because it feels like impossible to make it.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of like ritualistic. I listen to a lot of SZA for Deus Ex Machina, specifically Ghost in the Machine, off of her latest album, that is the latest album, SOS. I was just thinking about then like mind-body dualism and kind of thinking through that. So there are a lot of Charlie XCX in the Bed Rotting piece for Brat. There's so much music. I think music for me is more important than art history.
Yeah.
To some degrees. I think for me, just because there is like, I think a place in music for everybody to sort of, I think, sample and kind of steal and feel what they want to feel and interpret what they want to interpret. And I think for me, growing up in the Jersey Shore, I grew up hearing a lot of different music, classical rock, hip hop, and, you know, all these things. So I just love music. And I think for me, especially like thinking about who I make work for, right, which isn't necessarily always academics, and thinking about like my family, thinking about Black people, music becomes that like entry point in. So when you see a piece is named after Kirk Franklin, it becomes easier to approach that piece because there's something familiar there for you. So that's, I think, music.
Yeah. No, I get it. I originally come from music too, so I'm right there with you. And so I wanted to switch to discuss one of your tuftings that's featured in the exhibition. Your tuftings really serve as powerful companions to your tapestries, with the central Black adolescent figure contrasted with these vibrant color blocking. Can you speak about the themes found in your tuftings, and particularly this work Into the Blue, and how does the handmade process of these works fit with your overall artistic practice?
I started tufting in 2020. I had a really incredible professor say, okay, we get it. You can make tapestries. What else can you do? And I was like, that's fair. But I think really she just, I think, wanted me to push myself further. And I think that she kind of understood that even within the mediums of tapestries, as they've changed a lot over the last 7 years for me, there was almost like this barrier there. And a big thing for me, and I think when making these works, was thinking about levels of vulnerability. I think the one thing people say to me a lot is, Qualeasha, you're so vulnerable. But I'm also like, it's kind of a trick because I get to hide it underneath so many things, and there's so many other things happening that it's almost, there's distractions there. The tuftings for me became this like other place of processing about things that I didn't really necessarily want to talk about in the tapestries. So thinking about like trauma and thinking about really the self as a unreliable narrator even to that trauma, something that happened 20 years ago, and how I felt about it then and how I maybe experienced it then is not the same thing that I feel or experience now in the present. So there's this like time kind of link between them. And, you know, I came to them because I saw a photo in my, I guess, my childhood bedroom, and there was a Looney Tunes rug like nailed in like above like my bed. And I was like, leave it to my parents to just kind of do what they want. But that idea, right, that a tufted rug could be a painting, I thought was really important. And I've always loved, my dad and I like watch cartoons all the time, every Saturday, every Sunday. That was like our main conversation. I think Point was going to see different movies, watching these different cartoons. He would go to the store, he'd bring back a stack of like original like Steamboat Willies and like Looney Tunes. So a lot of my drawing, especially then as somebody, as a kid who didn't know that she was gonna be an artist, was copying.
Yeah.
And as I kind of then, you know, got older, I started learning more about these references and learning kind of then about the really racist and, you know, the history of blackface and just mammy culture within cartooning, the gloves, you know, all of minstrelsy, just like all of these different references that kind of were just like secret digs at black people and you know, especially also the Native Americans and, you know, anybody who wasn't white at this time. So then I was like, wow, this inclusive world I thought I saw through cartoons and through comics didn't really exist or really apply to me even still. And so I just started, this character came out, and it was just a character of that time, right? This like simple black figure that just was able to hop into different moments that I couldn't. The thing about the tuftings for me is they hold so much tension through kind of also like being an open space. So there are these specific moments like Into the Blue. I am thinking about, you know, that moment when the curtain's pulled back, when you're taking a bath by yourself and you feel caught. But I'm also thinking about all of these other things for me personally, like the fact that I can't swim. Or, you know, just the fact that I was always really shy about my body, which isn't something I, you know, kind of then experiment or explore further in KMBA. These things don't change just because you change. And then, you know, in the tuftings as well, for me, there's this desire, like I said, to talk about things in the tapestries in a different way. And I think what's really important for me in the works, tapestry to tufting, is conversations about race and how we have them and who gets to be at the front of these conversations. And it's a very specific choice then to talk about whiteness without specifically talking about whiteness, or to talk about capitalism sometimes without specifically like showing these things, or, you know, race. You know, it's important for me, I think, to hold that space a little open, because it can change what the work's about. A thing I really hated, and that the tuftings were really aimed to do, was to eliminate this idea of trauma porn, or this moment of someone kind of coming up to the work and seeing this horrific thing as it is presented outside of its context and kind of long for that other story. So I like for the tuftings when people kind of come up and they're projected onto, because ultimately I think that's what happens anyway when you make a piece of art and you pour all of your like deepest and inner feelings into it. People come and they see what they want to see anyway. So the tuftings kind of take advantage of that, and I started getting into theory a bit and started looking at Freud and his theory around the uncanny, right? This familiar but like scary, like strange thing. And for me, the tuftings kind of sit within that. They kind of take advantage of being something familiar, something you've seen before, but also something's a little weird. It's like it's like a little off here. And so yeah, I love them. The color palettes for me sit still within this kind of like digital realm. But really also thinking about like the primary colors you use as a kid, kind of like being drawn to these neons, then referencing also the limited color palettes that you get in online drawing software. So for me, a lot of drawing as a kid was done in Microsoft Paint. And so the tuftings are often replicas of these drawings that I do in MS Paint, or that I've done as like etchings or intaglio prints, and translating that meaning there.
Awesome. Thank you. And just to close out, I know we're running out of time. What would you like viewers to take away from the exhibition Code Eden?
You know, I like love when I get that question, but I'm also like, I don't know. I try not to, I'm like, I don't like to be projected onto, so I try not to tell everyone else what to feel. But I think I always just like want people to walk away with a question.
Yeah.
Right? I think like my work is a question for me. It's an answer for me. It's a way out. It's a way through. And so I always just hope that someone finds something in the exhibition for them that makes them feel seen or makes them want to learn something more, or makes them, feel a little bit differently about how they see the world around them. I think it's meant to, all the works are usually meant to serve as a disruption to kind of like your daily routine. So yeah, I guess like not to say I hope people feel disrupted,
Yeah.
but I want different things for different people. Some people I want to laugh and feel warm and fuzzy. Other people could cry, and that would also be just good with me too.
Yeah. Awesome, thank you. Do we have time for a few questions? Okay, great.
Yay.
So thank you so much, Qualeasha. That was really amazing. And so do we have any questions from the audience? And there's someone with a microphone. If you just raise your hand, and they'll bring it to you.
You can also say you hate it if there's no questions.
Oh, no, it's
Like I love debate forum too.
Okay. Oh, there's a question up front, yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure how to phrase this. How did you find the inspiration to combine the digital world and the more classical art world?
Well, I guess I would say it's a really long answer, and I'm going to try to keep it short. But when I first started making the tapestries, it was a result of like direct world experiences I was having. So at the time, in 2017, I would say, was when I made my first tapestry. But pre that, we're living in a new first Trump presidency, and we're living through Black Lives Matter and police brutality and all these things happening on campus. What I found at that time, as somebody who was an RA, very pro-Black, very outspoken, queer, all these things, was that I was being used as like a moral compass for like the majority of people I knew, whether I wanted to be or not. And it wasn't because I was sitting here like, I'm right and you're wrong. It's just because I had a Facebook account and was using it to the full extent of my liberty. And what I found happened was this kind of dehumanizing thing, right? I would go to a party on a Friday night and have someone like ask me about this Facebook post I made and if they actually needed to cut their grandpa off at Thanksgiving this year. These are not things that I care about, right? But these are things that people have decided that I am the keeper of, right? Like, I'm the keeper of conversations on racial justice. I'm the keeper of conversations on feminism. I just became that for people, and I didn't become a person, right? So once I kind of felt that, I felt really frustrated, kind of being, I think, robbed of a regular existence. And I felt like I was being treated like, a god, like somebody who had control that I didn't feel like I was supposed to possess. So the first tapestry I ever made was titled Cult Following, and it said on it, God is a young hot ebony and she's on the internet. And it was kind of it was a playful mocking, I think, of what I had been experiencing. And I titled it Cult Following because the internet and our social media experiences are very cult-like. And it was so silly. But the reason why this like classical imagery was just an understanding of, I think, what it takes to make it as a Black artist or as an artist. You are told you have to kind of find yourself within the art canon, and you sort of have to do something that no one else has done before. You have to do it like better than everyone else. There is this like goalpost that feels impossible, and if you can't do those things, then the work's got to be traumatic. The work's kind of got to be about these things. I remember I love Hank Willis Thomas to absolute pieces. But I remember the first time I saw the Branded series, and I remember I was like, who is this for? What happens then when a Black person walks into the gallery and has to be confronted with an image of a Nike swoosh being branded into somebody's like skin, right? It's a painful thing to think about, right? But it's something that people love, something that makes money, right? And that's what the art world is to an extent. So I had to think about, how was I going to have this thing I wanted, which was to be myself wholly and fully, without, damned consequence, really, without restriction, and also have it pay me? Because that's the thing, too. People love to see, you stand up for yourself, you be outspoken, and all these things, but that doesn't pay the bills, And oftentimes, I think as we've seen, right, your social positioning in the world can be something that like makes or breaks you, can cause you to lose opportunities as much as gain them. So I kind of felt like if we're all going to kind of treat me in this way, then I should kind of rise to that occasion. So working within religion was a really big concept for me, especially at the beginning, but working in these like classical style of paintings, it just legitimized the work. At the time, there were no NFTs, right? So we had digital art, but that was kind of like a slur as much as like craft kind of is, right? I think craft has come a lot further than even digital art has, right? But at the time, it was like bonkers to think that here I was, you know, almost two and a half years of art school, all this debt I could see piling up, and I was gonna make something out of just working digitally. I was like, I knew that wasn't the case, and I also knew, right, like, we kind of talked about this earlier for everyone who wasn't there. We talked a little bit about Duchamp, right, and this idea of audacity. You have to just sort of decide, and I had to kind of take a stand, I think, and say, if I want this to exist in this way, then we have to build a world around it. So I won't say it was strategic, but it was fully strategic. Thinking about, right, how do I legitimize and make this familiar and put it in this context that we all understand. So it was about like kind of like the birth of this godlike figure who's like, okay, fine, I'll take the throne, and then sort of kind of goes then about her business as years go on. But that was sort of the evolutionary part. But then technology and analog, though specifically, the Jacquard loom and the invention of computing as we understand it are not that separate. So Charles Babbage invented the analytical engine, which is, I think it was made at, I want to say like the 18th century, 19th century, somewhere in there. 19th century, 1865. But Charles Babbage made the analytical engine, which was really just like a souped-up abacus, built based off of the schematics for the Jacquard punch loom. So he looked at a punch card for the Jacquard loom and saw that there were all of these punch outs for the warp and the weft, yes, no, over, under, and looked at that system and said, how do we use this to do math on a computer, right? How do we use this elsewhere? So he took that, where he saw it there, and translated to that, and Ada Lovelace, who worked a lot in early computer engineering, helped him kind of on that. So there was a woman there who is kind of quietly, slightly left out of that history. When we then look and follow the history of Jacquard weaving and computers, we can see as like computers became popular and technology became in demand, when we look at early Silicon Valley and like the early Southwest, all these like tech industry spots, who was like doing all the like weaving and making, and I say weaving intentionally because these threads for these microchips that went on the Apollo, these supercomputers, all of this fine detailing work was done by women, particularly indigenous women, especially black women, the women of color, who had the weaving expertise because it was a part of their culture, who were then hired and then again left out of history in computing. So there's a really long relationship there. Then when I get into, for me, then working in the Jacquard loom now, working with a computerized loom, I have the luxury of having a translation that is a pixel is near equivalent to a stitch. So there is a lot of like back and forth there that kind of happens. But then there's also like the appeal of, you said the word ephemeral earlier, and I always love that word because the internet is so quick. It's so fast that you can't even remember what you've seen. I actually like was crying 2 weeks ago because I posted this work and it was really good and I didn't get enough likes on it. And I just was like, I hate that I'm even upset about that because it's actually so irrelevant, because you have to understand that like people just go like this all day long and it has like literally nothing to do with you. So having these things woven is almost an insistence that they stay, that they are a part of history. It renders them important. It slows down time and kind of holds it in that way. And for a lot of these things, you know, I make a piece 1 week, and then in 3 months, it's totally unrelatable, you know? And that's just how fast it is. So I love that relationship. I kind of love playing with time in that way, being a keeper of it, being a custodian of it in that way. And yeah, and then saying, like, these things matter. Thinking about a piece on the far back wall on linguistics, dealing with different black figures from social media who have been memes, who are rappers, who are singers, people who are forgotten. You know, one of the women who I'm lucky to be mutuals with on Instagram, the Apple Store queen herself, you know, she's homeless now. people don't care, but we still kind of like use her image in a lot of ways. And so, I find these things like really interesting, right? Like who gets to be remembered in that way. So that's sort of why I love that relationship. Yeah. That was my short answer for the long question.
Thank you guys so much, and we'll be around in the gallery if you have any more questions.
Yes, thank you. Just one last comment. Qualeasha was generous enough to meet with some students from our intermediate printmaking course, and those works that they created based on her work and being inspired by her visit are in the hallway so please make a point of traveling down that way and taking a look. Thank you so much, Qualeasha Wood, Leandra Kelley. This was awesome, very inspiring. Thank you so much.